how I create my multi-camera rig. So I've gotten several comments asking about how I go about mounting the Insta360 Go 3 and the regular Insta360, and even having a second camera that I can mount to do like a multi-camera shoot like I've shown in some of my previous videos. So this video is kind of going to be like a basic breakdown and my approach to how I do multi-camera rig setups. The first thing I want to talk about is the GoPro style of action camera. Now, I've gone through many iterations of how to go about doing this. The first iteration is actually something like this. So this here is my Canon 5D Mark III. The way I went about mounting an action camera, this is a GoPro Hero 6. Now the thing about GoPro, depending on which model you have, so this is a Hero 6. This is before they started including that little clamp at the bottom. So this guy right here, this does not have any mounting points. The newer ones do. I think GoPro Hero, I think 7 or 8, 9, or 10, something like that. They have the mounting points that come down on the bottom. Now, if you can get a GoPro that has that, that's going to save you weight. It's going to save you space. But if you don't have that, you're going to need some sort of GoPro Hero case. So this is the case that I've used in the past when I was actively using my Hero 6. And all you got to do now is simply mount the GoPro onto a top handle as such, and you basically got multi-camera shooting. Just got to make sure that the thing is aligned. The lens is more or less on top of the other lens and is not blocking the field of view. And so this way you can get multi-camera footage. The good thing about this sort of thing is that you are not gonna, you can attach filters, so ND filters, polarizers, things like that. This is iteration number 1. This will work on Insta360 or anything that gives you that kind of GoPro clamp that you can then attach to something like a cold shoe. So this here is a cold shoe mount that kind of goes right into this right here. So as such, go ahead and stack it on top, boom, tighten that, align, straighten, and we're done. So this here is version 1. Now let's talk about version 2. So version 2 was this guy right here. So you'll notice I have a 40mm pancake lens on the original EOS M, and on the EOS M I have a cam weight cage. Now the approach to this is simply, you're gonna need a cage to make this work. Doesn't matter what camera you have, you're gonna need a cage, and on that cage you're gonna need to be able to attach a essentially NATO rail with a 15mm rod attachment that's connected to it as such. This one is from Small Rig. Just look for NATO rail 15mm small rig, 15mm rod, NATO rail thingy, right? Not thingy, but you know what I'm saying. And then get yourself any cheese plate that you can then attach to the side of the cage, because you're going to need that additional space, so that when you go ahead and attach your Insta360 or GoPro, the way I went about attaching this is simply the GoPro thing flips out and I attached the other end of that, and then I attached a 15mm rod. Now something like this, these rods I got from a company called Nietzsche or whatever, however that goes. What the cool thing about this is they come with 1/4-20 threads that you can just screw right in, and so this is ready to go. And so all I do now, simply take my camera and then insert that as such, right? Make sure it's aligned, it's pushed back, and I just go ahead and tighten that as needed. And you'll notice here the lens of the action camera and the lens that's attached to the camera is more or less aligned and centered as such. So this way, whenever I am shooting any kind of video, we're good to go. Now you can adjust. So you'll notice it's a little bit off, right? So the center here and the center is here. If I wanted to raise this up just a little bit, all I would have to do is go ahead and adjust this, right? And then just kind of slide that up just a little bit, and then go ahead and tighten the bolts as necessary. And then boom, you have perfect alignment. The cool thing about this setup is that it, at least for me, it fits within the palm of my hand. So if I want to run around, I can run around as such. Now this is the EOS M original. So if I don't want to essentially palm it and I want to have an easier time, just make sure you get yourself a little bit of a little NATO thing, and then just put your top handle. And because of the weight, it's going to be shifted a little bit, so you're going to have to off center the top handle, so this way it's more or less balanced when you're handling this. And so now this isn't that, you could probably throw this in your sling or shoulder bag without a problem. Just take off the top handle, you're good to go. But when you're shooting, you just pull this out, and this is ready to shoot. Now this is the EOS M. If you're going to shoot on something like the EOS M6 Mark II, which we have right here, this is the EOS M6 Mark II, you would have to do something like get yourself a cage for the M6 Mark II. So I'm going to go ahead and attach that cage right now, just to kind of demonstrate how that works. As long as your cage is sporting quarter 20s on one of the sides, right? So this here on the left side, I've got some quarter 20 mounts that I can then attach the small rig. Make sure that it is tightened all the way. I've got my EOS M6 Mark II with a little thing, and then all I have to do is simply, I can now swap from one camera to the next. Now once I've tightened, we're good to go. EOS M6 Mark II with Insta360. Again, I can palm this thing. This is how I've kind of run through travels and airports and things like that. It's a little wide, but with the cage, it actually is easy to handle. Now this was phase one. The good thing about this setup is that you have 4K on your camera, and then you've got like a 5K on the Insta360. Now I know some of the newer Insta360s, they do more than that. They do like 6K or 8K, which is fine. I mean, that's good. It gives you a lot more to work with. My personal preference is that I'm not so big on resolution, especially on these action cameras. It's not that big a deal. What's more important is compact and portability. Now, an action camera, by its very nature, is already pretty compact, but something like this is still pretty chunky, still pretty big. I mean, it's wide. This is where Insta360 Go 3 comes into play. From the pod, the little action cam comes out. It doesn't matter if you have a rangefinder style or DSLR style with a viewfinder or something like that. This here is a GH5. These are some of the accessories that comes with it. This is one of the magnetic attachments. All I got to do is attach that, and this here, it becomes my multi-camera rig for the GH5 or whatever camera that you're sporting. The good thing about this design, especially with something like this, the good thing about it is that if I have a big lens, I can extend it out to match the field of view. So this way I'm still getting multi-camera and I'm getting gyro data stabilization. But at the same time, if I wanted to sport a smaller lens, like the Pancake 40mm f2.8 from Canon right here, and I go ahead and mount that on here. Now, obviously, I don't want this thing to be sticking out like this, right? So all I got to do is push that back, bring that down, and we're good. This is because I'm mounting this without a cage, right? And this is a solution for not just viewfinder style cameras, but for any camera. So this particular base plate, I don't know if you guys can see it. It is from a company called Tilta, and it is for 114mm lenses. So there's two versions of the base plate. There is the one for 95 millimeters, and then there's one for 114 millimeters. Get the one for 114 millimeters because you'll notice how the 15 millimeter rod extends out further. So this way you can mount bigger lenses. So that's why I recommend getting the 14 millimeter. Now for my M6 Mark II here, I ended up keeping the 95 millimeter lens version only because I wanted to make this as compact as possible. Now what I did was I literally took one of these and I took a grinder and I went ahead and cut the thing because the design of the M6 Mark II is such that now the challenge with a rather large base plate without making the modifications as I did here, this thing was going to cover part of the battery opening and I wouldn't be able to open the battery up. And so that was the reason for cutting this. And at the same time, I didn't want it extending out beyond the profile of the design of this camera. So, and at the same time, I didn't want the lens, or rather I didn't want the Insta360 Go 3 to be extending beyond the width of the camera. I wanted this to be as compact and as short as possible. And so when I do this, this works out perfectly and without a problem. As you'll notice here, now this is like super small, right? Super compact, easy palming it, and I get a good quality video. I get 2.5K here. It's actually 2.8K, 2,866 pixels wide and tall. So it's a square video. And I'll share a different video on how I go about getting that square video extracted from the Insta360 Go 3 because the Insta360 app doesn't allow you to essentially do square video. It allows you horizontal or vertical from the square profile that it has, but whereas with gyroflow you can get the full square video. I'll show that at another time. But this is essentially the setup. In order to make this happen, get yourself just look for on eBay or just Google Tilta base plate, and you'll get this or some variation of this, but not the 95 millimeter. Get yourself the 114 millimeter version. So this way, when you mount it on any this is more or less universal. And so I will use this with my cage. I don't use this with this kind of setup anymore. What I do use it for is something a little bit different. And this here is my Sony ZV-E10. One of the things that you'll notice on this camera here, so this is ZV-E10, doesn't matter what camera you're using. Again, the importance of the cage. Now, in order for you to stack two cameras on top of each other, what I'm going to show you here, in order to make that happen, you're going to need something that ensures alignment. Ideally, the camera that you're stacking on top is the same or a similar camera with a similar cage design. Now, in my case, what I've done here, in order to stack the two cameras together, is on the bottom camera, I have a NATO clamp that I have bolted essentially onto the cage, and I screwed it in from the inside, as you'll notice right here. And so if I were to loosen this up and I were to take this out, and so this is the NATO clamp that I've screwed onto here. Whereas the top camera, what I've done is I have mounted a cheese plate, and on that cheese plate I've attached a small rig NATO rail. And you will notice that I took some, I hope I don't offend any Canadians, or maybe I do. Canadians are too nice. Anyway, so I took some Canadian currency, and the Canadian coins were essentially the perfect width for the offset that I needed. So I basically bent one here, as you'll see on the bottom, and I bent, and I have a flat one here, and I screwed this, and it gave me just the right amount of space so that I can go ahead and stack this one on top of the other, and then I go ahead and mount that. And that minute amount of space allowed me to get access to the trigger shutter button, as well as the on and off switch. But at the same time, if I need to access that, I can just lift this, switch it on and off, and then switch it on or off, depending on whether I'm using the camera or not. And then I go ahead and tighten that back up. And right here, I've got my 2-camera rig. And with the NATO rail, the reason for this NATO rail is not only so that I can connect it to the camera here, but I can also attach a side handle grip. First, open this up. Now, obviously this design is not perfect, but it gets me to do what I wanted to do. I go ahead and slide the grip in there, slide the NATO rail right into the clamp, tighten that clamp, and boom, there we go. I've got myself two-handed, stable video shooting as necessary. Now, typically, the question that comes into play is what is the appropriate focal length to pair between the two? What I like to do is, so on the top, I have an 85 millimeter, on the bottom is a 50 millimeter. Now, typically, I will either do 24 or 35, and then I'll pair that with the 85, because I feel like 50 is a little too close to the 85. So 24 or 35 would be ideal. And then in this situation, I'll simply attach the GoPro or Insta360. Actually, it'll most likely be Insta360. And then once that's attached, now I'll attach it so that I have enough space for my fingers to get into the grip. Go ahead and attach that, and boom, I've got myself my 3-camera rig as such, and it's kind of like a Bolex. So the old school 3 lenses that you could swap, but in this case, I'm recording all 3 at the same time. This setup here, this is my event rig. This is where I want to capture B-roll for some sort of project or event or client or whatever, right? This is the thing that I go with. I get my ultra wide, I get my telephoto, I get my standard, and as long as I'm about 2 to 3 feet from the subject, everything is going to be more or less aligned. The closer you get, obviously, there's going to be decentering, but the cool thing about this is that, and the way that I go about it, I give priority to the tight telephoto lens, and then I might digitally adjust later whatever is in the bottom wider angle and the ultra wide to more or less align. Now, this is 5.3K on the ultra wide, so I have a lot of leeway, and I'm dealing with 4K footage. So even if I crop in a little bit, it's gonna be fine. Each of these cameras is individually recording and individually capturing gyro data so that I can digitally stabilize either through Catalyst Browse on the 2 Sonys or through GyroFlow. I typically do it through GyroFlow because it's faster and better quality. And I've done it where I've got my 2 Canon cameras, my Canon EOS M and EOS M6 Mark II, similar kind of layout or design where the 2 are stacked on top of each other. Then I'll use the data from the Insta360 to stabilize the 2 cameras as needed, because there's such close proximity. All of that movement is more or less going to be the same. So that is the key, that is the secret to being able to do multi-camera, whether it is multi-camera portable as such, with your rangefinder style or your mirrorless viewfinder style, or if you want to do your DSLR. Now, even with the DSLR, actually I don't do this style anymore, like I mentioned before, because I don't use my GoPro much. If anything, one idea I do have for the GoPro is to get it modded so I can attach C-mount and EF or Micro Four Thirds lenses on it, so that I can do moon photography, because it's got, in comparison to a full frame, it has a over a 5x crop, but that's a discussion for another day. One of the things I am looking to do is getting a second base plate with a second monitor mount attached to a additional version of the Insta360 Go 3 magnetic clip. So this way I don't have to keep swapping the base plates, and I can have it ready and mounted to go. That way all I have to do is simply dismount the lens, or rather the little camera, and I can just go ahead and magnetically clip it on to the other body, depending on however I'm going to be using it. Make sure it's aligned, and boom, we're good to go. And this becomes my multi-camera ultra wide angle base, collected with or attached to whatever I'm going to be using to shoot and stabilize. That's really it. I hope that was helpful. Again, multi-camera 3-camera rig, telephoto standard, telephoto standard ultra wide, and at the same time, this is my EOS M6 Mark II with the Insta360 Go. Again, the base plate that you want to be using is that 114 millimeter Tilta base plate with the 15 millimeter rod attachment. One thing I forgot to mention is in order to have a setup like this, you're gonna have to find these really small 15 millimeter rods. Basically do what I did here, to basically attach to the base plate. As such, you'll see the silver aluminum cut that I made for the base plate. It's the same setup here. I don't know if is this one that I cut. Yeah, this is also one that I've cut, and it's attached. Now, in order for this one is a little custom job, obviously. The way that I did it was same idea. Took the base plate, obviously I cut it to fit the profile of the camera. I used the modified 15 millimeter rod that I cut to basically give me just enough space so it can fit. Now what I did was I took a L bracket, a typical hardware store style L bracket, and I basically bent it so that I have this as such, bolted using a hex screw 1/4-20 onto the magnetic clip, and that was that. So this is basically how you create multi-camera setups for your run and gun scenario. Now, if you want to use a larger camera like the 5D Mark III, and you still have, but you want to do something like this, you're gonna need a cage for your 5D3, and you're gonna do the same thing, right? It's got 1/4-20s on one side. Get yourself a NATO rail clamp, and then whatever you stack on top, like I've done here, make sure that it is aligned. Get yourself a side handle, so this way you have control over that. Now it's going to be a big chunky rig, especially, I mean, this is pretty chunky already, like compared to my DSLR as such. If you're going to stack on a DSLR, just understand that this is going to be the size difference. So if you have any questions, let me know in the comments below. I'll see you soon.